Okay.
So I am recording, and I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and then ask anybody if you can actually see my screen.
Yay, Learning Revolution.
Yay! All right, thank you. So welcome today to the Learning Revolution, to my show, The Thrive in EDU. It is most every week, Wednesday at 4, but I have been lucky to have a few bonus episodes for the past 2 weeks. And so I'm excited today to have
She froze.
And we'll be discussing the return to school and a lot of questions about school. And if you have questions, please join in, share your ideas, put questions in the chat, and we'll just do some quick intros. I will tell you, well, first of all, thank you to Chip and Susan and Dennis for joining in today to be on my panel discussion here. And my name is Rachelle Dene Poth. I would love for you to connect with me on Twitter, Instagram. It's rdene915. I am a Spanish and STEAM teacher, also a consultant and an attorney, love school. And I will say that, this is why it's difficult, because I'm not yet used to saying that I'm the past president of the ISTE Teacher Education Network. So I just have past president in there. So I guess I'm inching into it. I just realized that, but that's okay. Learning as I go. I'm also an ambassador for a couple of different organizations. So I've been connecting with educators. Love writing, love learning, like I said. So I've written a couple of books in the past year, not just sharing my own story, but sharing stories of my students and other educators that I've connected with. So that's enough about me. And speaking of presidents, I'm going to introduce you to the new president of the ISTE Teacher Education Network. Dennis, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I am following up some, let's just say, figuratively speaking, some very big shoes to follow up with Rachelle and Tori before her and Randy before that. But I'm excited to be the president of the Teacher Education Network this year. And the nice part about it is I just retired as a professor of education at Graceland University. And so I have a lot more time on my hands now. I'm the host of the Makers the Making podcast, which is going through a real big redesign for this fall. As you can tell from my picture, I'm also a musician. I'm a bass player. I play in a local band with a bunch of old geezers doing classic rock. So that's a whole lot of fun as well. My background in writing is actually in science safety. Once upon a time, I was a science teacher. And most of my writing is out there in the field of science safety. But I'm hoping in retirement that blossoms a little bit. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, and you're too kind about the big shoes to fill, but you will be just fine because we have an amazing leadership team. And so thank you, Dennis. And next is Chip Cash, who is the president-elect starting this year. So Chip, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, yeah. So as Dennis just so eloquently pointed out, if he thinks he has big shoes to fill, imagine how I feel, knowing that I have to follow the path that has been blazed by all of you. But I'm entering my 36th year of teaching. That you can correctly assume that I started when I was 12. Well done. I've been a mathematics teacher of both high school and middle school kids throughout my entire career. I've been a coach of multiple sports at multiple schools. This past 3 or 4 years, I've been doing communication with ISTE-10. I've been hosting and moderating the ISTE-10 Twitter chats, which is a great deal of fun. I also work with the College Board and AP doing AP exam reading, which I've done for about 11 years. And for the last 2 years, I've been a Khan Academy ambassador and a text help titan, especially using Equatio, which is a tool that is really terrific for kids to use, especially to express mathematics and science ideas. And then, for fun, I have 2 cute little dogs. I have 2 kids. And as you can tell by that picture on the screen, I'm also a Revolutionary War reenactor. Although with COVID-19, there isn't much reenacting going on. So hoping someday soon that we can get back out there and and have that kind of fun.
I know, definitely. I love seeing the pictures too, just of the leadership team and all the activities that we all get involved in whenever we're not working, that we kind of unwind and enjoy and have some time to, you know, self-care and all of that. So thank you, Chip. And now Susan.
Hey everyone, my name is Susan Poyo, and although Chip says he is starting his 36th year teaching, I actually just celebrated my 36th year of marriage yesterday. So that picture up there is my husband and our 4 grandchildren, which, you know, any of you who are grandparents, you know, it's so much more fun being a grandparent. Anyway, I am very excited to be here. Thank you very much, Rachelle, for inviting me. I am the Director of Education at Franciscan University in Steubenville, Ohio, home of Dean Martin. And in my role, I am also a teacher, an associate professor, and my pre-service teachers, my students, are just the loves of my life. I mean, they're the ones that catapult me into continuing to learn. And I have been an educator for over 25 years, started off in K-12, public, private, you name it, you know, down in Miami. I know someone was talking a little earlier about diversity, and that's where I grew up. My husband and I both did. And so there's a lot of the experience that I gained there in Miami that I know I've been able to incorporate into the classroom here. Some of the things that I'm interested in are obviously the courses that I teach, which focus in on literacy and math and social studies, believe it or not, but all methods courses. And that's where ISTE 10 has been so awesome and such a great inspiration for me personally, because everything that I've been able to use as far as integrating technology, I have learned and been pushed gently into trying and experiencing myself as how would I say, an older learner, I think is the best way to put that. But I really appreciate all of these people that I get to spend, you know, part of my day with. And then obviously I know this is going to sound crazy, but I really am thankful for COVID-19 because it validated my research. My research was on basically preparing pre-service teachers for dual learning environments. So not just the face-to-face learning environment, but also the online and virtual learning environment, which all of us have had an incredible opportunity to learn and grow in that area. So thank you, Rachelle. I'm excited to be a part of this conversation.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm glad that you addressed why you were thankful for it and how it impacted your research. So I thought that was interesting, but there have been a lot of different comments about looking at the positives. I mean, it's such a negative experience we're all going through, but what can we take from it that's a positive? And for me, I thought it was this really loud, obnoxious wake-up call to really evaluate what I was doing as a teacher and to make some changes in my classroom and to really think about it. And so I don't really like alarm clocks to begin with, but that is one that did help me to kind of evolve in some ways in my practice. So today we're going to talk about a lot of different things related to teacher education and education heading back to school. And so ask questions in the chat. You can also use the hashtags for Learning Revolution and also for our ISTE Teacher Education Network. That is our hashtag that you can use, the ISTE 10, and connect with us. And Chip, I have to put yours on there. It disappeared. I think it's hiding out with the letter T from the word past that I missed on the first slide. So I will make sure that everybody has that.
If this is happening in real, you know, if I can go on here in real time and do this, let me see if I can.
And I will bring it back up. So.
And mine has one extra letter on the end of it.
Does it really?
Yep, I fixed that too. All right, go ahead.
You rock.
All right, it's good to go. Okay, so let's get started. Let's see, should I ask you all some questions? I think I will, but of course I'll answer them too. And anybody that's joining in today, please share your answers to the questions as well. But maybe the biggest question that a lot of people are thinking about now is, how do we or how should we get ready for a virtual school year? And I know in my experience for my school, we were originally going to start hybrid, and they had everything set up, and they went to the school board meeting for that Monday night. And just throughout the day, that Monday, as they got to the meeting, the plans changed. So now we are starting for the first 9 weeks fully online and making that shift. But a lot of teachers may not necessarily know yet and are trying to wrap their heads around, okay, what do I do that I would normally do in the physical classroom, like getting to know students or setting up activities? So I don't know if any one of you wants to kind of take that one on, like how do we or how can we get ready for a virtual school year if it ends up being the whole school year, especially?
I think one of the things that you said in your comments that you just made is really important, is the fact that so many teachers still don't know what they're preparing for. And every state is different. In Iowa, our governor has given a mandate that schools have to be 50-50 face-to-face and online, a minimum of 50-50. And schools are resisting it, and it's kind of a crazy mess right now. And other states have said, yes, you can go online, and we've already seen some schools that have started face-to-face, and it's craziness.
I'm going to just add to what you said. I think that those teachers who may not know whether or not what the plan is yet, I think probably most of you K-12 teachers already do know that. But if you are starting face-to-face, and I know in higher ed, we're starting face-to-face, but there's the reality that we could go for a couple weeks and then, you know, some outbreak happens and we have to go completely online. I would say if you're starting off face-to-face, start small. Just keep it really simple those first couple weeks to kind of test things out and see how the kids are doing. I know there's been a lot of resources that have been shared in the last couple months about, you know, social emotional learning, and especially now during something like this. And we can't forget that. And as excited and gung-ho as we are normally, right, at the very beginning of the school year, and we've got all these ideas that we've been thinking about all summer long, and we want to just jump right in and implement them right away, I would say for this semester, especially, just kind of hold back a little bit, which I know it's going to be difficult, but keep things simple. And then start adding things as we move along in the school year to see whether or not, you know, based on how things are going.
Yeah, you know,
I agree.
thinking about how you know, sort of the feet on the ground. I think the approach that the leaders of my school took, I think was really smart. And we spent a great deal of time talking about, as Susan just mentioned, social emotional learning. You know, what are kids going to be feeling and experiencing as they interact, whether they're in school or out of school, whether they're worried about catching the virus or transmitting the virus. Just trying to wrap our brains around how all of that's going to be received. Trying to focus on community building. I mean, last year when we went virtual, we had the advantage of knowing who all our kids were. We had, you know, 4 or 5 months in the classroom with them. They knew us, we knew them, you know, so if we were communicating in email or messages or asynchronously, they could hear in their minds our voices, and that was a help to them. But we're facing a fall in which I may have a lot of kids in my classes who don't have any idea who I am, or kids that I'm supposed to mentor who don't know who I am, and I don't know who they are. So trying to find ways of building a relationship with those kids is really critical, even before we start thinking about what is the curriculum we're going to deliver. So last year, the curriculum really took a hit because we were doing crisis education. We were trying to figure out how do we do this in a way that kids are still going to learn. And because we were educating in a crisis mode, we were letting go of some things that ordinarily might really drive us crazy in terms of, well, we got to make sure kids learn skill X or concept Y. So this year we put all of that other, plus throw in the diversity, equity, and inclusion work that we need to do on top of the social emotional learning, the community building. All of that is really the big focus first, because that's going to carry us through whether we're in school or online or both.
You know, I would add a little bit onto what both you said. You know, Susan, you were talking about your research on preparing teachers to be able to teach in both environments. And unfortunately, you know, most teachers were not prepared that way.
Right.
And we had this very short summer period in which schools had time to sort of react to what happened this spring and provide needed professional development, find resources for their teachers. And one of the big problems is when you're a school, you're almost a little bit in isolation. And where do you go to get those resources? Where do you go to find those experts that can help your teachers out? And that's where I'm going to plug ISTE 10 just a little bit and some of the other professional learning networks, that this is where people have to gather, where people have to connect and share ideas within the professional learning networks, that when Rachelle has something really cool going on at her school that they found really works, she shares that out within the PLN. And so we all get to benefit from what happens at that location, and so on and so forth. So we have to really spread the word that being an active part, leaders need to be doing it, teachers need to be doing it, aides need to be doing it. Being an active part of the professional learning networks is going to be critical to our success.
I don't know if it's just me, but it freezes every so often. So I take a pause, but just a couple of things. I mean, it can be overwhelming to think about where to start. And so Susan is right, like just start and focus on something. And so that is something that I've been trying to do even more. Like when I feel that it comes and goes, because sometimes I think, oh my goodness, where do I start? And then I have a moment where I have my focus again, and then the overwhelming feeling comes again. But just thinking about, okay, what are the things at the beginning of the year that I would do? I would try to get to know my students. I would set up ways to communicate with them, with their families. I would have information about my class. I have a list of like 5 things. Okay, now what do I do if I'm not starting in my classroom? So how do I get to know my students? Well, I look to technology. Thankfully, like we have Zoom here, where we can actually see and hear each other. And it makes such a difference, as opposed to sending an email or something where there's no exchange of, you know, the visual and getting to know somebody's voice or your teacher's humor, or in my case, sometimes the lack of humor when it comes to my students. But we have different options. So I know at the end of last school year, trying to just kind of get through, but I started to use things like Buncee because I could record a video, or using Flipgrid. And looking at the start of this year, setting those up where you or the students and their families can post a video, so you can at least get to know each other. I mean, I have the benefit where most of the students that I have, I've had the prior year because I'm the only Spanish teacher. But for Spanish 1 students and for my 8th graders, I don't know them. And so we are starting virtually. We're going to use Teams. But beyond that, if not all students can join in at the time we have class or something, just to have that space where they can actually hear each other is important. And social emotional learning is a huge piece of that. And I know a couple of weeks ago, Laura Steinbrink and I talked about it. And also even looking at mental health and wellness and managing all of this. I talked with my friend Mandy Freilich a few weeks ago on here as well. So lots of considerations. And I'm glad to see people joining in with some different questions. I know David had dropped a few questions in there about the different platforms for having meetings live. I used Zoom because of my school. We didn't have, people could use Teams, but my comfort level was Zoom, and my students really liked it because we could use the breakout rooms like Susan had mentioned. We did scavenger hunts with the breakout rooms. And I know there was a big issue with security, but if you go through all the settings and lock them down, makes a difference. I can say that a few weeks ago, I had a chance to sit in with Microsoft when they were showing the new Together mode that's going to be coming up. And that puts you all where you actually feel like you're sitting together side by side in seats. So it elevates that feeling of being connected. And even though now we're kind of next to each other on the screen, depending on how you have it set up, I don't feel like Susan's arm is like right next to me. But in this Together mode with Teams, you actually could like tap on that person's shoulder. It really looks like you're tapping on the shoulder. So lots of options out there. I don't know if Chip or Dennis or Susan, if you want to add anything to that.
We use Google.
Tapping you.
We use Google Meet last spring because the security concerns around Zoom. So the school, because of the expectations that are placed on students, if every teacher uses their own thing, then that creates real chaos for kids. So school mandated that we're going to use Meet, so we use Google Meet, and trying to create breakout rooms in Google Meet, at least last spring before they started programming that in, required multiple devices and a whole lot of really crazy work. So we're moving to Zoom, and of course, as soon as we went all into Zoom, Google Meet communicated that they were programming in breakout rooms and all kinds of other Zoom-like features. So, but we're committed to Zoom. Zoom seems to be a thing that's easy enough for people to use, for kids to use. It gives us enough features, and I think that'll be fine until somebody comes up with a better thing, and then, you know, the powers that be at school will decide what we'll switch to. So, but it's been pretty workable.
You know, one of the, Susan earlier on said she was thankful for COVID. And I'll toss out another reason that I'm thankful when I try to see the bright side of things is that what Chip just described, this pandemic is going to drive innovation in a way that we have not seen in years and years and years. And so there will be some very positive things from an educational standpoint, from a technology standpoint, that come out of this. We're going to see entrepreneurs doing things, creative people coming up with new ideas. And I find that part really exciting.
Yeah, I agree. And even in teacher education, you know, those of us in higher ed, we're going to see it. If we're teaching these teachers, they're not only students, but they're seeing the entire impact of this crisis, of this pandemic, and realizing that that's their profession that they're going into. And I tell you what, I had students 3 years ago telling me, oh no, I'm never going to teach online because I want to teach real students. I kid you not. That is what I heard. Not students at Franciscan, okay? I'm just saying I heard that somewhere. But now they see, you know, now it's like the rubber hits the road right here. This is, the time is now. We've got to do it. I mean, the time actually was 5 years ago, but that's okay. Better late than never. And I think we're going to get there. And the coolest thing is that the education community is such a caring group. I mean, we understand each other. We understand that none of us is getting rich from what we're doing. And so I love the idea of sharing these free resources, especially like, you know, the recent ebook that was put out. I think there was over 130 different short journal articles, all of it having to do with the pandemic and how educators responded to that. I'll get the link and I'll put it in here in the chat box, but we're a great community and we're going to come out of this with, you know, with our heads held high, learning a whole lot. But hey, you know, that's who we are, right? We're lifelong learners. That's what educators are. So this is a good time.
Yeah, thank you for that. And the thing about Zoom too, the security was the problem. And then my students preferred Zoom because they could actually see each other like this as opposed to within Teams. But now I did drop the link to an article from The Verge about Teams. So if you just even click on that just to see what it looks like. But when they presented on it, they were talking about artificial intelligence built into it and how it helps people to be more conscious of their posture and their interactions and just feeling connected. So it was pretty, I remember like sitting in the meeting and there was probably 15 and they said, don't take any screenshots. And I really wanted to take a screenshot because I just couldn't believe what it looked like as people were popping into that space. So if you can click on that link and see it, I'm not sure exactly when it will be fully launched, but yeah. Did you want to say something, Chip?
No, I'm just looking at it now. It's really interesting.
It is. And the first time when I saw it, I thought, this is amazing. So now when we head back, my school is going to be using widespread Teams, but people were using what was comfortable to them. And I've used them for years. And I liked that you could see everybody, not just the person speaking. And my students really like that as well, too. So moving on, I know a couple things that all of you kind of mentioned. And I think that's so important right now, too, is having connections and being able to ask for help, especially now when, I mean, in the spring, people said, oh, well, you know, different digital tools, or you know how to do this, or you've been using that. And I said, it truly didn't matter because I never taught a course online and I didn't have a clue of what to do. I tried, and then I learned, okay, I can't fit everything from my physical classroom into the virtual space. And I realized that, and then I started to ask friends, PLN, people I became connected with through the ISTE community, and of course other networks and so forth. But why is it, especially now, like if you are just starting to get connected, why do you think now is more important than it ever has been to be involved in a professional learning network? If anybody wants to take that, or even how do you develop one, or how do you become part of one, aside from ISTE here, of course, which is a good example.
One of the things that I did with my pre-service teachers, I introduced them to PLNs very early on in our program. And there are actually, if you do a Google search for educators you need to follow, like on Twitter, it gives them, there will be articles of the top 25 educators to follow, the top 50 to follow, that type of thing. And that's a great starting point for them to go out. And I tell them, go take a look at them, look at the posts they're making. Does it interest you? If it does, follow them. If it doesn't, move on to the next one. And the second thing that can happen is getting them involved in some of the activities that PLNs do, such as the Teacher Education Network Twitter chats that we have every month. You meet new people on there. You start seeing people that you can be a lurker and be sitting in the background watching, and you can see people typing in comments or sharing links that you're going, wow, I like what this person's doing. And so you follow them, and before you know it, your PLN has just started to grow. It started to blossom. And looking at who those people are following and starting to talk to people. And then the next step beyond the lurking, the identifying and following is starting to become an active member. And once you become an active member and you see people starting to follow you, then you start to follow them. And it's a community growth thing. It's, to me, professionally, probably in the last 10 years when I've really been active in ISTE and growing my own professional learning network, have been the most amazing experiences of my career, as far as growth and engaging and that type of thing. So that's what I'd recommend for telling people how to start. And you know what, in K-12, you can have your students do the same thing. You can have students, elementary school, middle school, high school, connecting with other people and sharing ideas just the same way we do. So it's not just limited to the adults.
You know, it's funny, Dennis, you mentioned that, and the reality is the kids at least in high school, are actually way better at it than we are. And the evidence is every year, and this goes back a number of years, I would find out that my students had sort of back channel social media groups to deal with the subjects they were learning with each other. And that would invariably involve kids from other schools. So, you know, the interesting part is I don't think I have to teach my high school kids how to develop a community of learning. They already do it. Some of their communities of learning are a little more useful from my perspective than others, but they're really good at that. I have found a large number of resources based on what I have read from following what people in my professional learning networks are writing, what their blog posts are, what their Twitter posts are. Anything I can find that looks like a really interesting idea is worth following up on and may really tremendously impact my practice. So any way that I think a teacher can do it, they should. It's just incredibly valuable, especially now when there's some despair about what to do to help kids figure out how to learn in this environment.
Right. I agree. And I put in the chat box there a link to every semester, a couple of us from the Teacher Ed Network, we have started this PST-PLN Twitter challenge, or actually it's not even a Twitter challenge anymore. It's just a challenge for growing your professional learning network. And we invite any of you who are K-12 educators to please come on board and help mentor some of these, you know, future educators that are entering into the profession that you love so dearly. The more mentoring you can do, the better I think our education, you know, the field of education will be in the long run, looking, you know, 5 years down the road and whatnot. But yeah, the other thing, you know, probably those of you who are listening to this, you have your own system of organizing all of these great ideas that you gain, that you gather. But I know that was something that was very difficult for me when I first started a PLN. And maybe this is something that, you know, if you wanted to share with a colleague who isn't, you know, who is still thinking or on the fence about, you know, using a social media for professional purposes. I use Google Keep, and I'm not trying to promote them or anything, but it's just a really easy way for me to grab all of the resources, because, you know, sometimes you'll have 20 different, 40 different tabs open, right, on your computer. And it's a real easy way for me to grab it and stick it into this like sticky note, and I can always go back to it, and I can label it, I can give it a color, and I know what those colors mean because I have a little cheat sheet right there as soon as I open it up. But I would encourage you, as you are sharing resources and gaining resources, to collect them. And I know, you know, people like Rachelle, she's outstanding at curating these resources from a whole bunch of different people and actually putting them into something usable. So that's just my, I guess, my 2 cents in that respect.
That was an excellent 2 cents. But it's the one thing that you just said too, that kind of, it always makes me laugh, is the whole social media and connecting. And I wrote a series of blogs. Once I figured out what blogging actually meant years ago, I wrote a whole series of blogs about how I was so wrong about social media. And it was just Snapchat and Twitter and LinkedIn and Instagram and Voxer. I just went through each one with a different post. And I didn't want to be on Facebook for years. I didn't understand it. And I laugh when I told this story, and I can't remember who I told the story to, but I had to plan a high school reunion, and I was trying to find people in the phone book. And my friend was thinking, why do you even have a phone book? First of all, do you know what year it is? Do you really think you're going to find 600 people in a phone book? And suggested that I get on Facebook. And sure enough, I found, I don't know, instantly had 150 classmates back. I thought, all right, they're onto something, but I didn't know the value in it. And then with Twitter, I think I had an account, a different account, maybe 10 years ago, but really started to get more involved and connected with Twitter when I was getting my master's. And that was starting back in 2014. And of course with ISTE, and then just over the years since then. And when I think back, if I take the Facebook away, and if I take the Twitter, I probably would have to take all the other forums that are out there away too. And I was keeping myself isolated and wasn't giving opportunities to myself, but worse, I wasn't giving opportunities to my students, and just all of the things that I've been able to bring in for them over the past 5-6 years, especially even with schools being closed, just with the connections I have, what a difference that has made. So, you don't have to do all the things, even though I know probably everybody in here is so connected on so many different platforms that it can be overwhelming. But if you're looking for a way to start, I mean, ISTE is a great community. That was huge for me when I became a member, and just each passing year. And then Twitter, it can be overwhelming, but just following a hashtag or getting involved in one chat a week that, you know, kind of meets your interests. And like Dennis, it was you that said you suggest them and they look, and then you don't like it or it's not the right fit for you. There's plenty more out there to move on to. It's just, you have to take that one step. So checking the chat here. Yeah, I started to drop the Twitter handles in there. Just start connecting. And we do have, Chip runs a great chat for us. We have it each month, always on a Monday night. And we do use the hashtag the ISTE10. But you can always tweet something to us there as well, just asking questions, because I've been able to get so many answers just reaching out on Twitter or Facebook or anywhere that you're comfortable with. So any other comments about professional learning networks before we move into kind of our last little phase here for our discussion today? And feel free to ask questions. I know I love seeing the different questions about the different platforms, and then the tools that you're using to share, like the Wakelet and Padlet. Those are great as well. Thanks, Dennis, for dropping in the ISTE 10.
I want to add just one thing real quick. A couple of years ago, I sat in on a session that our past president, Tori Trust, and I think she was with Jeff Carpenter and probably Dan Krutka, and they were talking about developing your professional learning network. And one of the points that they made that really stuck out to me was the fact that it really helps if you look for people that aren't exactly like you. If you look for people that have a different vision or a different viewpoint, that it really helps, it helps you as an educator to, like, first of all, not that you have to get on the bandwagon of something, some moral or value that you don't agree with, but at least you get to hear, different perspectives. And hearing different perspectives always makes us more empathetic. And I think as an educator, empathy is a huge disposition that we need to have. As a matter of fact, I saw something recently on Twitter that I retweeted on Facebook, and it said the 3 most important school supplies that we need for this semester coming up. What was it? Patience, flexibility, and grace. So I just want to, share that with you now, and as a positive, to trying to make sure that we're entering into this coming up year with good vibes, if you want to call it that, but with hope rather than despair.
Yeah, thank you for that, Susan. I like those. The three words again were, I know, grace.
Yeah, well, patience,
yeah,
flexibility, and grace.
And grace. Okay, good. Flexibility, definitely, right? As we enter whatever it's going to be for hopefully the short term part of this year, but we don't know. I've heard some conversations in the last couple of weeks of people really thinking that this is going to be the look of school for at least another year or 2. And I very close to fell out of my chair when I heard that, because just thinking, our inclinations, we want to get back into our classrooms and just do the normal things that we have been doing, but we can't actually do that right now for most of us anyway. I know it's different in different areas of the United States. It's so interesting for me to have those connections and to hear from friends who live in smaller areas, and they've already started school and they're back in their classrooms with everything set up in place as far as distancing, but just how different it can be, and just using that to kind of learn from. So thank you for sharing on that. And the last couple of things I guess we want to talk about today are, I don't know, Dennis, what do you think? Microschooling, because I've heard a lot about it. I've been reading some different things about it lately, and just curious if you wanted to share anything about that and get everybody to kind of chime in the chat with that too.
Sure. I remember my first experience with something, they didn't call it microschooling then. We just called it study groups in a way. Was back when I was in grad school, and my statistics professor, one of the things he did to help us get through the class was to put us into study groups, mixed ability study groups. And it was a group where we could come together, we could talk about the class, we could talk about problems, we could share whatever was going on in relation to the class, and sometimes other things. And then recently, with the online learning piece, I've heard this term, microschools, starting to be used. And it's really very similar to that, in the sense that what you do with your classroom, you think about a normal high school class or a college class of 20 to 25 kids. When we're all face-to-face in the classroom, engaging them with each other within the classroom is fairly easy. But when we get into an online system, engaging them can be rather difficult, and losing them is even easier to do. When I was teaching online this last spring, there were a couple of students that I really had to fight to get engaged with any sort of online activity that was going on. And so what microschooling is kind of that, the old model of the study groups. You're taking your students and you're putting them together in groups. They're responsible for each other, for helping each other out, for talking with each other, for engaging each other in the learning process. And it helps to keep kids from falling through the gaps, so to speak. It gives them, instead of having to engage with the entire class all at once. And you know what that's like even in face-to-face. There may be 5 kids that have questions and you only get to 2 of them because of the ensuing discussion. But with the microschooling concept, you're able to work with smaller groups. And so it makes your job a whole lot easier as well. So it's a modern adaptation of something that has been done for quite some time, but it fits really, really nicely within the online learning environment. We talked about Zoom can do breakout groups. Those breakout groups, that's a fit with the microschooling concept. So it's something, I'm gonna put a link in for everybody for a little article that mentions it. And there's more than this out there, but it's something I really encourage everybody to look into and make it a part of your teaching practice.
Yeah, Dennis, I'm glad you explained it that way, because when I heard the term, I associated it with the tendency that some parents are gathering, kids from multiple families in a little micro school, and then they're hiring teachers to teach those kids. And, that's all fine and good. Parents can do what they like in terms of the education of their kids, and they've probably been doing this in some form via homeschooling already. But my fear with that sort of thing is the perpetuation of inequity, because there's going to be kids who don't have access, or whose parents don't have the resources to create that kind of access. And then we have a situation where kids who have those resources get the benefit of that kind of education, and kids who don't, may not be able to get online. As you said, sometimes, trying to engage with kids, their inability to engage may have nothing to do with their interest in engaging in class or the subject or the work. It may be that they're really busy taking care of their kids, or have to work on their family's farm, or whatever it is they're doing that's keeping them out of school during the day, but forces them to do all their work late at night. So I'm glad you clarified that, because it wasn't what you described wasn't what I thought it meant.
Well, and what you described, if you look at the very traditional microschooling movement, it is exactly what you described. And so what I have a tendency to do with things is I will see a concept and I will twist it. And I will think about, as teachers, how can we employ this concept to make the learning environment more powerful, better for the kids, better for us. And so you are absolutely right. If you go out and look at some of the microschooling links that you'll find out there, that's what you're going to see, is where parents pull groups of kids together. Well, why shouldn't it be teachers putting groups of kids together instead? And that deals with the inequity issue that you're talking about. And let's empower the students to be responsible for each other and helping each other out. So yeah, I took the kind of that traditional microschooling that you very accurately described, and I twisted it on its head.
So quick question, I'm going to throw this out there then. Could you do that with flipped learning, in the sense that when in the flipped classroom, you think about using that classroom time to put students into small groups, right? Where they're solving problems, where they're thinking critically, maybe working on specific, problem-based learning. It sounds kind of like that, in the sense of the teacher creating that group. What do you guys think?
It's an interesting concept. I think trying to get kids to collect together in small collaborative groups during times in which they're not engaged with what's going on in class, whether it's face-to-face or online, working through understanding of material and then bringing that collective understanding into a face-to-face or synchronous situation online. I don't see why it couldn't work. It really depends on the motivation of the kids to follow through. And I would imagine that's better if you have older students, but I would also suppose maybe it's not, you know, kids being kids, even if they're a little older.
I like what, if you've been following the chat, I like what David shared, because it does talk about everything that you all are saying. You know, small learning communities made up of students working in, whether it's mixed age group or same age groups, but they are working together. And what Chip was just describing, the, you know, that you use the flipped classroom model, you put the resources out there. I always cringe at the thought of putting a lecture online and saying, go watch it. But, you know, you put the resources out there, the projects that you want them working on, and the students working with each other to say, we're getting together to discuss this before we come into the whole class that's scheduled for this week. And so it adds that extra layer of exploration for the kids. So I think that's a really nice thing to share.
Yeah, this is such an interesting conversation. And thanks, David, for dropping that link in there, because I know just in the last couple of weeks, hearing things like pandemic pods and just a lot of the topics of what parents are thinking about doing when it comes to schooling. And then just with the micro schools, I've seen just in the last probably 2 weeks, a lot of different articles being posted out there as well. But one of the underlying issues, of course, is the equity piece, and for students, and making sure that all students have access and good focus, of course. And now I'm trying to check what, oh yeah, lecture means to read. Yeah, there's.
Uh-oh.
She froze again.
Oh, it's not easy. The summer's off. It's just, I always laugh at that, because usually when I'm saying that, it's we're all involved in a conference somewhere, or even like now, here we all are learning together, sharing ideas, asking questions. And it's nice to have a more relaxed schedule, although I don't think that this summer is offering too much of a relaxed schedule for anybody at all. And I even have to joke and say, oh, it's summer, and checking the calendar to see what month it is on some occasions. It's hard to believe that it is August, taking the breath down. I almost said July, but definitely a lot of things that we'll see evolve over the next couple of weeks. Some days it seems like things happen so quickly. And with schools starting back in a couple of weeks, my school starts, I think, about 3 weeks from now. And some I know delayed their school year to after Labor Day weekend. And some have already started. We'll see what the trends are. I know that I saw in the news earlier today that Chicago, I think, said that everybody's going to start online. Some schools started, and then the first day they had to then shift back to fully online learning. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. But to prepare, you have to be connected too, and be open to putting yourself out there, asking questions, seeing if people have questions, answering those questions. Yeah. Did you want to say something? Was that you, Dennis, or Chip?
No? I'm pointing at Chip.
Yeah. And Susan reminds us, patience, flexibility, and grace. Yeah. So that, I appreciate everybody joining in today for this discussion and meeting some of the members of the leadership team, myself as past with the T president, and everybody else that's here as well. We are going to be having our leadership team meeting coming up here very soon, and planning out our year. Throughout the year, we have themes that we kind of focus on for each month, and we have the Twitter chat, and we have community discussions, and there's so much sharing that goes on with different resources. As a high school teacher, I've really valued being part of this team and this network, because I get to see what is happening in higher education and help with my students and preparing them. And that's one thing that I meant to say earlier is, at the end of the school year, with some of my juniors and seniors who were really stressed with advanced placement exams and trying to balance everything online, I remember saying to them, okay, you have to look at some positives in this. And they just looked at me like, what could possibly be positive about this? And I said, for you who you're going to college in a couple of months, and for you who will be going to college or going into work, whatever it is, this, even though you didn't want it all at once, is preparing you for your next steps, whatever they're going to be. You're going to have to be able to interact online and to manage your time and all of those skills that they were building, although all at once. So try to look at that as, you know, something beneficial out of that whole experience. And a couple of them even said, I will never, ever again say that I don't want to go to school. I just want to go to school. I don't want to have school in my living room or in my bedroom or anything, even though I like sleeping in late and having access to the refrigerator all the time. But it was a learning experience for all of us. So at any rate, I thank all of you for joining in as panelists today. I really appreciate your time, and for everybody else who joined in here. And we'll see you next week for the show I have with Dr. Sheldon Akins, and I may have a second show next week. So stay tuned for that. And I'm going to stop recording.